Okay. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. The topic of tonight's event was the COVID-19 dialogue with sustainable travel leaders in Brazil and Honduras. We are the co-founders of ExplorEquity, and we're really excited to pull together this conversation. So ExplorEquity creates authentic travel experiences that support local economies and connects participants to social justice issues. Everything that we do is connected to understanding issues that are important, especially things like climate change, food sovereignty. We talk a lot about sustainability and exploring that through conversations on the ground in our travel experiences.
Yeah, so we currently travel to Brazil, Honduras, and Puerto Rico. And as Katerina described it, we are a values-driven company. So we recently started hosting events here locally in New York prior to the pandemic. So we want to continue building community here locally. We are based in New York City, and we're really excited to host this dialogue tonight with our amazing partners from Brazil and Honduras. Polly, could you introduce yourself and Viare Travel?
Hi, my name is Pollyanna. I am the director at Viare Travel. We're an incoming travel agency in Brazil, and we work mostly with tailor-made, responsible travel. What does that mean? That means that most of our experiences are personalized and curated, and we work primarily with small, local, community-based partners all over Brazil.
Great, thank you. We're so glad to have you here. And now I'd like to pass the mic over to Gustavo and Isis from Choose Honduras. Can you introduce yourselves and tell us about your company?
Hi, my name is Isis. I'm based on north coast of Honduras. Right now, I'm not in my home because COVID. I was in the middle of something, so I'm in near Parque Nacional Pico Bonito in a community called El Pino, and I'm the general manager of the enterprise, and I'm in charge of the logistics. And I have my partner here, Gustavo. So, what do you do?
Hi, yes. So I'm Gustavo. As Isis mentioned, we work together with Choose Honduras. We started working together approximately 17 years ago during tourism planning, mostly working with local communities and local governments. And we saw that usually there was a missing link in the fact that people were being trained and some resources were given to develop tourism product, but everything was left to their own and marketing. So 2 years ago, we launched Choose Honduras as a travel platform where we can sort of put together multi-day trips that feature and highlight all of these different tourism service providers that have been trained and helped over the years.
It is fantastic. Thank you both for introducing yourselves. I will start with the first question. The first question is, how has coronavirus impacted you, your business, and your plans for 2020 and beyond? And I would like for Isis to start.
Okay, so how can I start? Well, COVID for me has impacted completely. My incomes, as many of us, depends on tourism, so I'm worried about it. But it's an opportunity as well to reorganize our ideas and become a little bit with some ideas. For Choose Honduras has come to a complete halt because all our trips of 2020 have been canceled and or postponed for later with pending dates, but we don't know which date when we're gonna end all of this. So we also work in tourism planning, and we are finishing a destination branding assessment that we started before the pandemic, and looking at possible consulting opportunities for assisting local entrepreneurs and government when the tourism sector starts again. So we're searching everything to survive this pandemic.
Polly, would you answer for Biare?
Sure. I guess the real question is how haven't we been affected, right? The pandemic for us it really hit us like a ton of bricks. Like, we were having an incredible year so far. February was probably the best the best month that we've had since I opened my agency in terms of bookings. And so when early March came around and people started to talk about cancellations and postponements, for us it was really tough because COVID hadn't reached Brazil yet. So personally, for a few weeks, I was completely paralyzed. Like, I didn't know what to do. We were trying to talk to our local providers to see, how can we postpone? How can we work around different policy and whatnot? And people are like, oh no, we're not gonna get it as bad. Like, I think before it hit certain countries, everybody kind of had that sort of expectation that it wasn't going to be as bad. So the first few weeks were really tough in terms of the business and trying to figure everything out. And since I was in this sort of state of paralysis and just trying to get, filter all of these postponements and all of our client bookings, it wasn't until last week that I got to the point where I cut my team's hours drastically. And that was really tough for me too, because it's the sort of thing where I'm struggling financially, but you don't want the people who are working with you to struggle. So that was probably the hardest for me. But we'll talk about this with the upcoming questions, but we're doing our best to stay afloat. Our prediction for the year was to double in revenue, and right now I'm just trying to stay alive, like most other travel businesses.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. We know that travel has just been hit so hard by the pandemic, and everyone everywhere is having similar experiences, all trying to figure it out. So really glad this conversation is happening. Now we want to talk a little bit more broadly and just have you all share what's happening with the coronavirus impact on your country and the communities that you partner with, because you both partner so closely with communities throughout your country, and you're highlighting areas that people don't normally travel to and maybe aren't as aware of. And that's part of the beautiful thing about what you're doing. And these communities benefit so greatly from that additional economic support. Like, if they're a farmer, they can also host a group to visit their farm. So Choose Honduras, can you share first what this impact has been?
Well, Honduras as a country has been in a difficult economy and social political situation for a while. And the situation of this activity has added more problems, right? So local tour guides and tourism service providers in community are a total standstill. They don't know how to do because we don't know what to do as well. So it's very difficult to plan or prepare future scenarios because of this uncertainty around the world, because this tourism is difficult to prevent something right now. So the pandemic, we don't know what gonna involve or evolve and come after this and everything. So we are very impacted as Choose Honduras, as communities. Actually, I'm in a community right now. So I was talking with a local guide called Albin. You meet him, I mean, and we were talking about this, how was this situation, and he's a freelance tour guide, and he was talking, my plans were canceled, or my things, I don't know what to do. So this thing has impact very well, very tough, I mean, to the whole country, right? As tourism is not like the first thing. The most important thing are what to eat, um, to cover energy, to cover gas, to cover meals and everything. So tourism is the last things that people are gonna think about it. So we have to think, what are we gonna do? And that is one thing. Why are we here to talk with all of you? Maybe with so many ideas, putting together some ideas, we can come with a good thing for all of us.
So I hope that we can come up with some solutions, that action plans. There's really not a solution because it's something that, like you said, we don't know when it's going to end. Polly, can you tell us from VRA Travel's perspective, how has it impacted your country and the communities that you partner with?
Sure. I think so. There's I think one of the biggest challenges in Brazil is we're so huge. It's such a large country. And I think also, Isis mentioned that in Honduras, it's a country that's already in a difficult situation, and we have had a difficult political situation in the middle of a pandemic. And that's something that, I mean, I've seen that it's been reported in a lot of international media, but it's something that, we really can't ignore. We've had a bunch of changes in the country's leadership in the past month. Our health minister was fired in the middle of the pandemic. Like, that's something that you haven't seen anywhere else. And I mean, I won't get into too much of it, just because then I'll start to get passionate about all the political issues that are going on. But I think that's something that's added an even bigger stress onto the pandemic here in Brazil, right? So we already have this pandemic spreading throughout the country, and then there's this whole political disaster just to top it all off. And for the travel industry, that makes us even more nervous, because we feel like, well, who's going to want to come to Brazil when they see that we have a president who's belittling the severity of the pandemic, and not setting a good example. So, and I mean, and I'm sure many can relate with their own leadership, but that's just one thing that's really been a stressor for us. On a smaller, more micro level, we are incredibly concerned about the communities we work with, but the fact that the country is so big, it's just so hard for us to reach these communities, especially the more remote ones. I mean, here in Brazil, we've seen cases and deaths in remote indigenous communities, and in the Quilombola populations, and just in places where healthcare is so scarce, right? And so that's something that really worries us, especially those that, to an extent, welcome tourists, right? because how are we going to allow, or how are these communities going to have the courage to allow tourists back in when they see that, you know, there's a chance that they can bring disease and there's really a tough way out. An NGO that I'm on the board of, Projeto Bagagem, one of the things that we're initiating now is working on a survey where we're going to work with local volunteers to map out these communities that are involved in community-based tourism and see what they need in terms of help from an institution. So do they need, you know, training, or do they need materials, or, you know, do they need food? Like, what is it that they need, and what can we do to create sort of a method of getting back into tourism for these communities? I mean, when you two were here in Brazil just last year, you visited one of these communities that's primarily works with community-based tourism in Cotijuba Island in Pará. And so, you know, an example with Cotijuba, we've heard from them that they're having trouble getting supplies to make face masks. So like they don't even have, you know, the fabric and the supplies for us to make their own. And as of today, their city was put on lockdown. So Belém is on lockdown, and so, you know, it's a sort of situation where everyone's in sort of a state of there's really nothing they can do. They're struggling to get by. The government has had some. There's been emergency relief, but I mean, it's just not enough, right? So one thing we've been seeing is a lot of solidarity. So a lot of people coming together and working to support communities going through this struggle with the halt in tourism. In Cotijuba, one of our partner operators who also worked with us on your tour, Viveja, they have a campaign going on right now, for example, to have masks produced here in São Paulo by another NGO and have them shipped to Cotijuba so that they can have fabric masks for the population to at least have something to help them circulate. So we've been seeing this, which has been sort of the silver lining of it all, which is, you know, the solidarity in everything. But yeah, I guess that's the gist of things. I think the other issues we're having, you know, you see pretty much everywhere else, right? The travel industry having trouble getting relief from the government. Especially, I'm seeing this especially with tour guides, because many are not unionized, many are not hired by companies, they're autonomous workers. So, you know, they've seen their entire means of, you know, their entire way of life just halted, and, you know, they don't know when they're going to come back. So, yeah, I think that's sort of where we are right now in terms of how we have seen the communities dealing with it.
That's a lot.
Sorry.
It hits home when you're mentioning, I mean, Katerina and I have very fond memories of being on that island and interacting with all of the people there. So it's tough to, well, with that, how are you guys adapting to COVID-19 and the new normal? I guess Choose Honduras should start.
Hi, yes, so like we were talking about earlier, definitely the level of uncertainty that we have limits us very much in the amount of planning that we can do at this moment right now. We have focused on the marketing side on updating a lot of the information and the objectives in our marketing plan, but without putting a timeline to it. So we could just fill in the blanks of the dates of when we could start doing that in the future. But the plan definitely plays. But there are so many factors completely out of our control that that we are looking at. So, for example, just a few months ago, and this sounds like it was decades ago, but just a few months ago, one of the selling points that we had for Honduras was the fact that you hear a lot of problems about destinations that suffer from over tourism around the world. And we all saw the photos of that the canals in Venice that were polluted, and the 14 cruise ships in Cancun or Cozumel at the same time, and all those issues. And so we had a selling point that, you know, Honduras was the exact opposite of that. We were under tourism. We did in a lot of the communities that we visited, in a lot of the national parks that we go to, chances are you are going to be the only person on that trail on that day, especially if it's a weekday. So I'm not sure that a competitive advantage is going to be a reality moving forward, because now it seems that we are all in situation of under tourism. So that's something that has us thinking. Another factor, because of the nature of the trip that we sell, which are tailored to international travelers, we have a lot of questions as to how the airline industry is going to land after, no pun intended with that, after this finishes, because if they are closing down certain hubs, if they are reducing the frequency of flights, there could be an impact on the price of flights, and that could put sort of like a difficult situation for destinations that that could have maybe some more price sensitivity, or travelers that, you know, would look at those destinations that have you know, a simple example for us. We are closer geographically to the United States than Costa Rica. But because of the amount of demand and the amount of travelers flying from the US to Costa Rica, you can get a flight ticket to Costa Rica for half the price than a ticket to Honduras. You know, if prices are going to go up even more now that airlines are going to have less seats available, you know, it's another factor that we're going to have to consider. And how can we do that without putting any pressure on the fact that, you know, the service providers in the communities cannot sell their experiences for less than it would be feasible for them to have. So there are a lot of uncertainty and a lot of factors. I think to us, the best thing right now is just keeping an open mind, making sure that we are very on top of the news, especially from the different industries that are going to affect or have an impact in what we do, and then, you know, keep an eye out for that. And at a local level, we have been having the opportunity of trying to get a step ahead and try to tailor protocols on how to run a restaurant or a hotel once this is open to the public again. In Honduras, for example, the Ministry of Labor produced a guideline that tells you, you know, you should do, you know, these basic things. But when Isis and I read the guidelines, they are very focused on like an industrial or like a retail commercial environment. They're not super tailored for hotels or restaurants. So we decided to, you know, reverse engineer it and start the process of, okay, when you go to a restaurant and you get out of your vehicle, what is the first contact point? In Honduras, in a lot of the towns, you are going to have a local guy on the street that is going to offer to take care of your car for a tip. And normally that process is done with a ticket, like in a parking garage that he has on a piece of paper. So we are wondering, what if people don't want to hold that piece of paper anymore? Would people be, but Isis told me, the only guarantee that you have of how long you have parked is because he writes down the amount on the ticket. So are people going to be willing to take a photo of the piece of paper while the guy holds it? You walk into the restaurant. We had an hour discussion on menus. If you're not going to hold a physical menu in your hand, are we going to have a server walk to the table with a poster board that has sort of like the menu pages there? And Isis is telling me that's going to be insane, because if it's a multiple page menu and you have 5 people in the table and one person is saying, please go back to the other page. So, it's giving us this opportunity to come up with those very specific things that are going to impact in the type of businesses that we work with. And then since we have a close relationship with them, there's many of them that are more than willing already to be the test labs of where we can start implementing this. I don't even want to get started because we don't have enough time as to how we are trying to figure out if we are going to have to do social distancing, on how we are going to fit people in the van from the airport to the locations. Are we going to have plexiglass in the seats between the passengers? Are we going to have one row open and one row closed? All of these details are interesting. And then in there, the factor of the cost again starts impacting. If you're going to have, a high ace Toyota van that usually we would hold 8 to 10 passengers, but now you are going to have half of the seats available. That means that you have to move an 8-passenger group to a Toyota Coaster size, which is a 24-seater, but it's twice the daily cost. So there's a lot of very interesting things to sort of figure out. This is like living in I don't play a lot of computer games, but one that I remember for a long time ago, and I feel like I'm playing it now, is Tetris. We are trying to put all these blocks together and they keep falling, and some days they fall really, really fast, and other days you are looking up and not one is falling, but it's sort of that situation. At least it's keeping us on our toes.
That is a great answer. And I love that you are thinking through all of the implications down the line and how you're going to be able to rebound when things do open up. And yes, I mean, there's a lot there. Polly, what are you guys doing?
Gustavo just gave me so much to think about. I hadn't considered the restaurant thing and the menus, and there's just so much that we're going to have to think about down the line. We're not there yet in terms of thinking of what we're going to do. We are thinking of what we're going to do, but we were thinking more in terms of are we going to include hand sanitizers in our welcome kits, because that feels like a good idea from now on. And where we were thinking of speaking with hotels and seeing what their sort of policy is going to be in terms of, will I want somebody to carry my luggage to my room, or am I going to carry my own luggage, that sort of thing. But I hadn't gotten to the restaurants and the valets, and there's just, it's going to be a lot for us to think of. One thing that we are trying to figure out, with these postponements, when can we start postponing travel to, right? So some people, and how are we going to talk to our clients and give them confidence to travel, whether it be a few months down the line or another year from now, because we don't have answers for anyone, right? So one thing that we've been doing a lot is having just conversations, right? Because everyone's trying to figure out what to do. Everyone's trying to create these sort of innovative or, new policies and whatnot. So I've been having a lot of long conversations with other people who are involved in sustainable travel in Brazil. With our local partners, I've been spending a lot of time on the phone with them and asking them how they're doing and what they're thinking of in terms of adoption for down the line. with Projeto Bagagem, the NGO I mentioned before. I'm also in a collective of sustainable travel companies called Muda, and so we've been doing a lot more talking about what each has been doing and supporting each other. So even with travel not going on right now, everyone's been on social media and everybody's been supporting each other and saying, support this local or this small travel business. So the one good thing to come out of all this is we're having a lot more deeper conversations with our partners, right? Because before, nobody had time. Everybody was always traveling and guiding people and working, in their inns. And we also didn't have enough time. So that's one thing that that has been fruitful in the middle of all of this. As an agency, we've been doing a lot of housekeeping, so working on our site and organizing databases and doing all of that work that we didn't have any time to do beforehand. We're creating content to share with our networks. We made a bunch of Brazil book and movie recommendations for our clients who are supposed to travel in the coming months, and sort of saying, while you can't come to Brazil, here's some music and literature. We made Zoom backgrounds for people too with Brazilian landscapes, but I forgot to put one on here to promote that. And then other than that, we're really just trying to reinvent ourselves. One thing that Gustavo mentioned was that he was worried about flights and international travelers. We're at that same sort of position where we are used to working with international travelers. And, what everyone has been saying is, local travel is going to be the sort of travel you're going to get once travel does start to open up. So we're trying to work on new products that will promote local travel for domestic travelers, which on one hand is an audience we're trying to learn about because it's not an audience that we work with. But on the other hand, it's also nice to sort of think about, how we're going to have Brazilians actually exploring Brazil, because the ones who usually have the means to travel will go abroad. So that's one thing we're doing. And then another thing we're doing, we actually just launched a campaign today, a crowdfunding campaign to publish a book. It'll be a cookbook in nature, but the idea is to bring recipes from our local providers and tell their stories, tell more about the ingredients and the regional cultures. And if it gets off the ground, I'll be able to bring my team back to actually work. And it'll give all of our local providers, but a good amount of our local providers visibility. So even if people can't come here quite yet, this book will be out there in the world for when people do come to Brazil, they'll seek out these sorts of experiences on the ground. And then other than that, like Gustavo said, we're just so unsure of everything that these are the little things that we can do to sort of try to reinvent ourselves and try to get creative and predict what will come down the line. But other than that, I guess it's really just a waiting game for most of us.
So many exciting things you're sharing, Polly. If you're doing this cookbook, you have to get the recipes from Neide and Cotijuba. Everything that we ate there was incredible. Let me think about it.
I already spoke to Mariana, and she said she's going to get us some recipes from Cotijuba.
Amazing.
Send me the dishes that you like the most so we can request those recipes.
Yes, we just shared today the ceviche that they serve in a shell. We have one more question for everyone, and then we have a lot of questions coming up in the chat box, so I want to make sure that we can get to them. So our last question for the group is, when you look to the future of travel, you've already mentioned some of this, but just kind of summarize, what are you hopeful for, and what are the challenges that you foresee when you look ahead? And I know that everything is surrounded in uncertainty, but let's kind of lay out our hopes and what you all foresee will be challenging. And I think we'll just continue to start with Gustavo, give Polly a break.
Yes, so the future of travel, in the way that we see it, we are firm believers of the model of sustainable tourism. We think that it's very important that it should be at the core. Unfortunately, sustainable tourism has been considered as a type of tourism, as a very niche type of tourism, and that is the wrong way to see it. Sustainable tourism is a philosophy, it's a way of working, and you can actually make any type of tourism, beach tourism, nature tourism, mountain cultural tourism, you could meetings and conventions, you can make any of those, or you can fit any of those into the sustainable tourism framework if you follow the very simple concept of sustainable tourism. To us, sustainable tourism is the tourism model where the economic and the social benefits are magnified in the host destination where people travel, while at the same time minimizing the natural, the environmental, and the cultural impacts in the destination. So you want to make sure that the tourism visits are not eroding the local culture, are not impacting negatively the environment, and are bringing incomes directly to the community. So, you can adapt that model to any tourism model. And I think that this really is the point where we are as destinations, as tourism service providers, as marketers. I think this is the great opportunity to make sure that we are doing that, and that we are doing it, by heart, really, that we are making sure that all of the steps in our trips, in our experiences, in whatever we sell, that we are fitting it into that framework and always keeping that in mind. And then on the other side of the equation, from the point of view of the traveler, I think now more than ever, you need to plan your trips thinking that, this trip has to make an impact. I have to make this trip count. If somebody traveled maybe 3-4 times a year before, maybe they decide now to travel once or twice, or maybe they decide, we don't know exactly what's going to be, but, from the traveler's perspective, make every single trip count. You are making the trip because you want to enjoy yourself, because you want to discover that new place, because you want to learn or experience something new, but make sure that, that there is that effort to put a value on, one service provider versus another based on what positive impact that trip is happening at the destination. So I think that, that's definitely one of the things that we hope that is going to come out of this, that, we bring sustainable tourism as a model to the mainstream of the industry.
Amazing. Yes. And we're hearing a lot of talk about that. There's definitely an awareness that's increasing. Polly, what thoughts would you like to share?
Well, I agree with Gustavo. He said it better than than I think I would have said. But just to add to that, I think one thing, and this is the model that ExplorEquity uses too, so this is something that I would like to see, is slower travel. I think that people aren't going to be jumping from destination to destination in one trip as much, mostly because of the probably the fear of contracting, whatever, be it COVID or whatever. So thinking in terms of health, like, oh, I don't want to be hopping on a bunch of different flights on one trip, but also thinking in terms of, what Gustavo was saying, really getting to know a destination and getting to know the people there, and consuming from the local providers in those destinations, and the smaller providers, which we really like to emphasize. So things like that, I'm hopeful for. Again, we can't predict anything, because on the other hand, you also see a bunch of people saying, oh, flights are so cheap right now. So you really do have, it's really hard to determine, what really will come out of all of this, but I'm very hopeful for much slower travel. So I would love to see more people want to visit Brazil and visit one region at a time. Like I said, as you know, the model you guys already have. I would really like to see more of that. But I guess, yeah, I think other than that, Gustavo said it all.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Let's leave it there so we can get into the questions. I've seen so many questions coming in. So I'm just going to ask Gustavo and Polly let's try to answer as many of these questions as we can and kind of do the answers maybe briefly so that we can keep going through them. Remy, do you want to share the first one?
Yeah, this first one is from Emily de Sousa. She would like to know, do we think that the pandemic and the situation that's going on will shift the government perspective and dependence on travel? Do we think that they're going to begin looking at quality versus quantity when it comes to tourism success?
Unfortunately, I think, speaking for Brazil and the little that I do know of our government statistics for travel, I don't think so. I think they're still going to be looking at numbers, the number of travelers, and how many people are visiting certain destinations. We have a very quantitative sort of system when it comes to measuring this sort of thing. So I would hope so, but I don't think that that's going to be a reality, at least not in our country.
Yes, very quickly here as well. I think that the emphasis on tourism by many destinations, by many countries, when you read that question, Remy, the whole Caribbean region pretty much came to mind. They really don't have a choice to be able to switch out from tourism to another industry. They don't have enough land to create like a very large agricultural based industry and factories or other types of things. So I think that they will still be very dependent on tourism as their biggest contributor to income. And unfortunately, like Poliana said, unfortunately, at the government level, a lot of times the easiest thing to do is to try to check off the boxes by number of people that arrived, the number of ships that came in this season, the number of unfortunately, that doesn't find the detail at the end of the equation, and unfortunately, it's difficult. It's a tough situation. Hopefully, they can be persuaded that there are other opportunities. So for example, in agritourism, and I know that, you guys did that on your Puerto Rico trip, and that's one of the things that we talked also about for Honduras. If you have already a farm, and in Honduras, there's very great coffee farms. If you can incorporate the tourism activity to that working farm, now you have an extra revenue stream for that family farm. So, if you measure that, even if that is not as impactful as seeing a big cruise ship roll into the port, when you look at the positive impact in the economy at the local level, maybe those visits to the farms are doing a little bit more than what it seems that it's doing. So, that could be a possibility. Another of the area that we work really close to is one of the specialized types of nature tourism, which is bird watching. And, a bird watching guide in Central America, and this includes Honduras, in 1 day of birding in a trip, and usually their trips are at least 7 days long, in 1 day of birding in a trip, usually makes the minimum wage salary for a week for somebody working in a factory in Honduras. So, there are definitely these positive things that we could do in trying to focus on that more specialized tourism. But unfortunately, I agree here with Poliana that right off the gate, governments are probably going to go back to their default of trying to count big numbers, and the photo op of the Minister of Tourism receiving the big cruise ship at the beginning of the season or something like that.
Thank you both for sharing on that. Next question that I have is from Candace. This is specifically for Choose Honduras. She would like to know if you travel to Olancho and if you can speak about the situation there. And also, she is asking about gang violence on top of coronavirus. And this is something that we already discussed from the beginning. We were talking to you about safety and this perception that Honduras has a lot of violence. So can you touch on that?
So for the first portion of the question, Olancho is not a very featuring a lot of our trips. The main reason being that we have focused a lot, if you look at the map of Honduras, Olancho is on the eastern part of the country. And we have focused mostly our first stage of creating trips that are based on the north coast, the western mountain range, and the south central highlands. Basically because we felt that there was a nice mix of attractions there, coffee farms, a lot of diverse national parks, all the way from coral reefs, mangroves, to tropical rainforest, to tropical high forest, to cloud forest. So it was kind of close by for us to do that. One trip specifically that Olancho is very important for is for bird watching, because when you are looking at bird watching, Honduras is cut traversely by a mountain range, and that mountain range is actually the southernmost limit of North American bird species and the northernmost limit of South American species. So on a trip to Honduras, if you are birding in Copan on the western part, you are getting a lot of the birds that you would see in Guatemala and southern Mexico. And then when you travel to Olancho, you are getting the birds from Panama and Costa Rica. So you get double bang for your buck on a birding trip to Honduras, because you are getting the species from Mesoamerica, from the northern part, and from South America. But for the rest of the trips, it's just a little too far off of our road to be able to do it. And then the second part of the question with the gangs, Honduras has an issue of gangs, mostly centralized in the main cities and mostly focused on very specific locations. You know, when you travel to a city like San Pedro Sula, which is where I grew up, which is where my mom has lived all of her life, you know, we have never had an encounter with a gang member. Because in the same way that you visit any city like Baltimore, like Chicago, like Charlottesville, or many other cities, you know, there are certain parts of town where I guess there is more of a concentration of that element. Right now, Honduras has instituted a full lockdown. So it's not like they are telling you you should avoid leaving home. No, they are mandating that you cannot leave your house. You are only allowed once every 10 days based on the last digit of your Honduran national ID to go to the supermarket or to the pharmacy, and that's it. So because there is active policing on the streets to enforce the quarantine, then homicide rates and a lot of the other gang-related situations have been reduced. A lot of the, I am assuming that a lot of the gangs are taking the opportunity, because a lot of the work that the gangs do, besides you know, the infighting, is that they provide support to drug trafficking, which is, you know, like protecting shipments and things like that. So I'm guessing that they're taking the opportunity to stay out of the radar for that sort of situation in that.
Thank you. Okay, let's keep going. I think we have a lot of questions coming in, so I'm going to just say preemptively that if we do want to answer all of the questions, the meeting will go over the time. So you're more than welcome to stay, and if our speakers are okay with extending their time with us a little bit, then we might be able to answer all of them. Okay, great.
All right, the next one comes from Christine. She wants to know, how do you overcome the possibility that visitors may have to be quarantined for 14 days when they arrive? This is what's going on in South Korea right now, and she assumes that other countries will adopt this as well.
Well, for us, most of our clients' trips are 14 days. So I think it's really just going, if that's what happens here in the coming months, we'll just have to tell our clients to postpone their trips. Because there's just no way that we can fulfill any sort of itinerary. You know, that's the time that people have for vacation in some countries. So I think for us, it's just going to be a matter of, unfortunately, having to tell people just not to come, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think we'll continue to see what's happening with that. But it's definitely going to be an obstacle for the international travel. And that's why I think a lot of people are focusing on domestic for some of the foreseeable future and developing strategies for that. We had another question from Emily. Shall we do Emily's? I'll just throw this out here. So she's asking, will the travel influencers have any influence left after this? Or did they become even more important? Like, we've seen the rise of the travel influencer and their impact and their kind of work in promoting different destinations. So kind of after this time, do we think that's not going to be important anymore? They won't have influence, or will they become even more important because we need to raise demand again for different locations?
I think that it's a little difficult to provide an answer to that in a sort of a blanket statement as an influencer a group in total. I think that what is going to happen is that there's going to be a lot of pruning of the influencer herd, and the influencers that can really show value to the destinations, the influencers that have the followers that fit with the market segments that and that are provable, that fit the market segment that the destination or the companies are looking to target. I think that there's actually going to be more demand than before for that, because that message coming from a person will always have more value than any sort of ad that any country can pay in a magazine or in a sort of advertising. So I think that influencers that have a loyal, and dedicated group of followers, and that there is a match between those followers characteristics and the destination's market segment targets. I think that there's probably going to be something definitely very interesting opportunity for that. I think on the other hand, though, sorry, just to not to extend on the other hand, I think that those blanket fam trips, invite everyone and let's just do them, I think definitely those are gone for now.
So Simone wants to know, what are some ways that we can collaborate creatively as the voice of sustainable leaders in tourism, especially with how we bring such variety and diversity?
I think one thing that I had mentioned was that here we see that the sustainable travel community is really coming together and supporting each other's initiatives. So I think that's a good way to start. Companies that maybe you've traveled with before and you really enjoyed the experience that you had, if you haven't written a review for them yet, do so. If you want to, promote any sort of post that because everyone's kind of trying to still keep content going just to keep in conversation with travelers. So I would do, little things to support them. If there's any sort of campaign that that they have that you feel aligns with you, I think that that's something, I think right now everyone really just needs a little bit of support. So promote the brands that you believe in.
Thank you. Michelle asks, Michelle's is a comment. She loves that you guys are innovating and creating during this time instead of letting it overwhelm and stop you. I'll ask Emmeline's question now. Gustav?
Mhm. She also has a question about this one.
This is Michelle.
Yes.
All right. Well, Michelle asks, lots of companies in the US are allowing remote work through the rest of the year. Are there any towns in Honduras or Brazil where you'd recommend an American couple who speaks Portuguese and Spanish stay for a month in the coming months?
I'm sure there are many wonderful places, but what do you all think about this? Michelle's ready. Michelle's ready to get out.
Well, I guess for Brazil, it would depend on the kind of weather that you're looking for. If you want, I mean, here you can have an experience here in the southeast of Brazil to spend some time in the mountains and have some really great comfort food in Minas Gerais, for example, the state of Minas Gerais. And if you want a warmer climate, the Amazon is incredible this time of year. The only issues with some of the places that you would want to do some remote work is that the internet connection probably won't be the best. So I wouldn't recommend you go to big cities, but it's really tough to know, where you're going to get the best connection to be able to work and have all your video calls for work, that sort of thing. The only place that I would probably avoid right now is the beaches. The beaches are closed. So unless you want to work just looking at the beach, I probably wouldn't go to the coast. But I don't know what it's like in Honduras. Maybe their beaches are available.
Yeah, in Honduras, the government has instituted a full lockdown. So yes, beaches, national parks, all activities are closed. I agree with Poliana, depending on what sort of climate you're looking for. If you want more of a coastal Caribbean tropical feel, then, something in the North Coast. If you want a little more tropical rainforest, maybe something around Lake Yohoa. If you love coffee, Santa Rosa de Copan is a great little town for somebody that loves coffee. But yes, you need to pack a lot of patience in that suitcase because the internet connection might not be what you are expected to if you have to do a lot of remote work. And the thing in the very near future is also that Latin American countries, and Honduras excels as this, like to plan at the spin of a dime. And for example, the government 2 weeks ago said, okay, this is the plan. Everybody has a national ID based on the last digit. You are going to go out one day of the week so that you can go to the bank, to the supermarket, and to the pharmacies. While they were down to number 8, they said, no, change of plans. Now we are going to do it like this. So number 9 and 0 haven't gone out of their house to the supermarket in like 3 weeks because the government changed the rules in the middle of the plan. So, it's sort of a learn as we go type of situation, looking out the window to try to predict the weather that same morning. So yeah, that could be a little tricky right now, but there are, depending on the weather or things like that, there are definitely interesting places for sure.
Awesome. This is our last question, I believe.
Yeah.
And then we'll wrap up. So Gustavo's, this is from Emmeline. She's inspired and thinking a lot about what you were sharing about the virus prevention measures and how you're thinking through that. And she's wondering, do we see a future where these kinds of prevention measures are a part of destination marketing?
I think that they will. I think that, you know, people are going to ask questions that they didn't ask before, as to, you know, is somebody going to be sitting next to me in the bus ride from the airport to the coffee farm? You know, if I'm getting a loaner pair of binoculars, are they being sanitized between each trip or different things? So, you know, a nature tour guide carries a scope in case there is like a nice you know, a wild animal or a bird or something that that people want to see, and then, you know, everybody lines up once the guide has the bird or the animal in the scope. You know, people line up behind it. Are people going to want to use the same scope one after the other for the trip? So I think that there's going to be changes, definitely. Last night I was looking at I don't know if any of you read or follow Skift. It's a news outlet online for things related to the travel industry, and I think I saw I think it was their Twitter feed last night that they were sharing the brochure of a travel planner that has an event for late summer, early fall. And the first 2 pages of the brochure for the event were a list of all the safety measures that they were doing. They were telling you, you know, when you buy your ticket, you're going to print your ticket online, and then you're going to walk through I call them the tunnel of Clorox, because I don't know what they spray on you when you're walking through one of those tunnels. So you're going to walk through the tunnel, and then they are going to have a sort of like a prepackaged meal option, very similar to what the caterers use for airlines. Instead of lining up at the hot dog cart in the convention center, they're going to have like a pre-packed, sort of like an airline type deal. So yeah, I think that that sooner rather than later, people are definitely trying to look at the angle of you know, the safety and the sanitation and the prevention as a tool to sort of market, you know, their destination. That is in our control. You know, you can plan your product based on that, but we are still dependent on what is happening in our countries and in our communities, depending on, you know, whether the health ministries or the governments are either relaxing the quarantine measures too soon and then they get a spike. I think that definitely tourism destinations are going to be impacted in the travel decisions by, you know, those spikes and valleys of contagions that could happen based on the decisions that national health authorities or regional health authorities are making.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for participating, for coming here and sharing your perspectives and letting everybody here learn about everything that's going on. We just have a few announcements to close out. And thank you all for coming. We hope you enjoyed it, and we're looking forward to having you be part of our community in the future. We are hosting a Travel Lovers Happy Hour and Group Therapy event on May 28th at 8 p.m. Eastern. It's a really fun event where we all commiserate. We invite travelers to come and share together. We have a guest mental health expert who shares coping tips for how you can kind of deal with this loss of travel that we're all experiencing right now. And then we play a game. So, but the event is up on Eventbrite, and it will be on our website as well in the next few days. And we also have a wait list open for our trips to Brazil and Honduras. And so right now what we're doing is capturing people's interests, and when we have new dates figured out or a plan as things develop, you'll be the first to know, and you'll have the first opportunity to book a spot. And then just in the chat box, to further connect with us, we've typed our handles on Instagram, as well as Choose Honduras and Viare Travel. And if you also want to share your handles in there, feel free. I also want to just acknowledge the great comments from Laura. Thank you for sharing about your experience in Guatemala. So that will be the end of our meeting. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for the invite, and thank you to everyone who asked questions. They were really great questions. And thank you to Gustavo. I have so much to think about after all of your comments.
Poliana, when we have a very, very rough draft so far of those restaurant protocols. If you want a copy of them in Spanish, because we are working them in Spanish, we would gladly share them with you. We could get your contact info through Remy and Katarina, and we would definitely share it with you if you want to, maybe get some of the ideas there, and maybe you give us the idea on how to turn that menu poster board into something that doesn't look like a kid's class presentation.
Yes, no, I'd love to see that, and I love to collaborate. Definitely
Okay.
send it through, and send it in Spanish. I need to practice.
Okay, excellent.
Wonderful. Well, that's what it's all about: sharing, collaborating, building community. All right. So thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night. Well, good night from here.